Hello and welcome back to The Vacant Light. Today I'm covering an album called Mammal from Altar of Plagues, and this review was actually requested by Misanthropy Eternal, who's one of my biggest followers on YouTube. Now I'd like to mention that I traditionally like to review albums that have not been previously covered on YouTube, but in this case, because it was a specific request from someone I do enjoy speaking with and does follow my videos, I did want to give my opinion on it for that person and just to give myself a new listening experience because I'm not familiar with this band prior to listening to this record. I'd also like to mention that I know I do have other requests from other followers, and I will be tending to those in the future. I am planning on being a little bit more responsive to the requests that I get while still maintaining my own personal interest in what I'm reviewing. The other thing I'd like to mention about Altar of Plagues is that this band is actually an Irish black metal band from Cork. I thought that was interesting because, number one, I've never heard Irish black metal prior to listening to this record, and number two, I actually have ancestors from Cork, so it was kind of interesting to see this kind of hit home for me on some level. Now, without further delay, let's talk about the record. Altar of Plagues on this record releases a very epic and sort of modern-sounding black metal album, while still maintaining some traditional black metal elements. The first thing you'll notice is that epic quality to the music, the epic and progressive songwriting style, and the very long songs on this album. There's only 4 tracks here, and the album actually is over 50 minutes in length, and three of those 4 tracks are actually over the 10-minute mark. So I do like the way the band can sort of do away with what people traditionally expect out of a song length, and kind of make the song length cater to their actual musical expression, their creative expression. So I really did like that. In terms of the instrumentation, the guitars were quite well done and had a good amount of diversity to them. There's a distinct sound difference between the rhythm and lead guitar parts, and they're used together quite well. The rhythm guitar is more low-end and has the most distorted sound out of anything on this record. It was quite interesting to hear because all the other instrumentation, pretty much except for the rhythm guitar and maybe a bit of the vocal work, steps away from the traditional black metal sound. But the rhythm guitar itself, you can really hear that sort of traditional crunch to the music, while still sounding maybe a little bit cleaner than what you'd expect from a black metal band on the usual basis. The other thing I'd like to mention is that I really felt that at first the distortion on the rhythm guitar did seem a little bit out of place because of the cleanliness and other elements of the music, but I felt that they were able to use that in the songwriting process to add enough tension and the parts where it mattered, so it did not become a major issue for me. And actually, I eventually did end up enjoying that quality more and more throughout this album. The more lead guitar style is much cleaner and is actually very light on the distortion. It has a nice warm sound to it, which I felt added a lot to the atmosphere and really helped keep a nice atmospheric and progressive tone to the record. So overall, the guitar work is well done. It's intricate enough to keep it interesting. It has moments of aggression, moments of atmospheric build-up, and really flows well with the songwriting process that was used on the album. The bass playing is quite warm-sounding as well. It's not too thumpy or really metallic-sounding, and it blends in for the most part, although there are a few moments on the record where, especially where the drumming lets up a little bit, where you can sort of hear that warm sound coming through the mix, which I quite liked. And it's interesting how they can use that differently in different songs to add a different appeal or spin on their sort of sound that they have here. And you can hear sort of a signature sound in the way they build up their songs and allow that tension to build up and smack you over the head with a really heavy riff at the end of a very tense build up. And the bass does fit in well with whatever sort of point they're at in the record in terms of those points of tension and those build ups that they have. So I quite like that. The drumming is pretty subtle, actually, for the most part. There are very heavy double bass moments, and there's generally a focus on a lot of just kick and snare, which I liked. Not too much cymbal work or anything like that. And I wouldn't say the drumming is highly technical. Even in the more subtle parts where there's more fills and things to keep it just interesting without having that huge layer of tension or double bass kick or whatever, you can still feel that there's only enough technicality that they kind of need to keep the song interesting, flowing, and maintain that progressive element to the songwriting process. There's never any moment where it feels like the drummer is just really going AWOL or trying to do something extremely technical for the sense of being technical. It really flows well with that songwriting process. And in general, the instrumentation on this record feels cohesive and flows well together with a nice blend between the different elements. And that goes for the actual keyboard and synth as well. You'll never find a moment on the record where the keyboard or synth is overbearing or is cheesy sounding. It actually flows quite well and is very key to actually building up the songs, building the tension, and adding that epic quality to the music. One thing I thought was really interesting on this record is that vocals are actually used quite sparingly, and I thought that the combination of that aspect to them, and also the diversity in the different styles, made the album really interesting, because traditionally vocals are at the forefront of the mix and are something to really focus on, but what they did on this record was use vocals to add sort of, how would I put this, to add tension or interest to key moments in the actual instrumentation rather than use instrumentation to back up the vocals. So that sort of songwriting process or songwriting element shows that the band is using a more modern and creative approach compared to some of the other music I listen to, which is not necessarily a good or bad thing, but I think works well with the sound that they really try to produce on the record. So I did like that. In addition to that, even without the vocals taking up the majority of the time on the record, in terms of how often they appear, I felt that the vocals had enough different styles to keep things extremely interesting without sounding stale or boring. Particularly, there's some cool chanting style vocals done by the male vocals, and especially on track number 2, Feather and Bone, towards the end, there's a very epic sort of chanting vibe, which I thought added to the big and progressive songwriting process that you really hear on the record. Additionally, there is obviously harsh black metal styled vocals, which along with the rhythm guitar forms the most harsh part of the actual record and relates it the most to the traditional black metal style. And I really felt that the harsh vocals were well done. They added a lot of tension, and they're sort of mid-pitched and just tense and in your face. Especially on the track number 2, Feather and Bone, I really felt that the sustained guitar tone mixed with the harsh vocal style really added a gripping element to that music. So I thought that was quite interesting. Additionally, on track number 3, which is called When the Sun Drowns in the Ocean, I really felt that the use of a female vocal style added another layer of dynamisty to the record and added a nice sort of shift in pace or alternate approach to the music before coming back into the final concluding track. And I felt that track number 3 in particular was quite interesting because it was the sort of song that a lot of bands may use as an interlude, but at over 8 minutes, I believe, in song length, that track actually feels like a complete conceptual song and does not feel like filler material on the record whatsoever. Additionally, on that track specifically, you'll hear some very unusual sort of male chanting vocals that are not like any style I've heard before, which makes them very hard to describe. But just through those different vocal styles, I feel there's a good amount of sort of dynamic approach on this record that's really evident in the songwriting process. Overall, I'm very impressed with this record. It's actually quite intriguing, and I do want to check out the band's first LP as well. My biggest gripe on the record is that I felt that in certain moments the guitar was a little bit too loud. Although the tension and the build-up of that tension was well executed, and those heavy moments with the double bass and the very aggressive guitar work came through quite well, I thought the guitar could have been scaled a little bit back to allow for the other instrumentation to add to that heavy factor. Like maybe make the bass a little bit more audible in certain parts with that as well. Also, the other thing I'd like to mention is that when you first listen to this album, there are a few parts, especially on tracks like Feather and Bone, that do seem to drone on a little bit, but really once you allow yourself to be surrounded by that atmosphere, and once you allow yourself to get really into the record, you don't really notice those anymore. Like, they just become part of the music and part of that build-up. So I didn't feel like this record was boring or anything like that, but those moments where you feel like it's going a little bit slow or needs a little bit more diversity to those build-up sections, those kind of for me went away after a while just once I started to get really into the atmosphere of this, which does get better on several listens. I'd like to mention as well that the first and second tracks were my favorite on this record, though there isn't a bad track on here. I really enjoyed the first track for the way it sort of was very blatant with atmosphere, in juxtaposition to the second track, which really blended atmosphere right into the music, especially with those sustained guitar tones and the way the vocals interacted with that. In conclusion, Altar of Plagues does produce some very fantastic music on this record, and they really have a very progressive songwriting style, but at the same time have enough traditional black metal element to their music to attract people who may not be interested in the more modern approach to the same extent, such as myself, as others. So overall, quite impressed with this record. Do check it out, and I do want to hear more music from this band in the future. Thanks a lot for watching this video, and have a really good one. Goodbye.